The clink of silverware stopped when my dad's voice boomed across the dining hall. "Everyone, raise your glass," he said, flashing his signature grin, the one he wore whenever guests were watching. "To our successful daughter, Olivia, New York's youngest marketing director." Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. The table erupted in applause. Glasses lifted. My sister beamed, her diamond bracelet catching the light as if even it wanted to brag for her. Then Mom leaned forward, her eyes sliding toward me like a slow blade. "And," she added sweetly, "let's not forget our other daughter, Riley." The room chuckled. Someone muttered, "The artistic one, right?" And laughter rolled down the table like a wave I couldn't stop. Mom swirled her wine. "Yes," she said with mock pride. "Still trying. But hey, at least she's consistent." My chest tightened. I forced a smile, my palms sweating against the linen napkin. The roast on my plate suddenly looked like something I couldn't swallow. Olivia laughed, soft, polite fake. "Mom, be nice," she said. "Riley just sees life differently." More laughter. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust my voice not to break. That's when the sound of a cane striking marble cracked the noise in half. Grandpa stood at the far end of the table, his old hand steady on the cane, his sharp gray eyes cutting through the polished room like truth through glass. He didn't say a word for a long moment, he just looked at them. At my parents, my sister, the smirking guests. Then he set his napkin down and said, clear and slow, "Then I'll eat with the one who never asked for praise." Silence. Utter, heavy silence. Dad froze mid-toast. Mom's smile stiffened, her color fading. Olivia's hand faltered around her glass. Grandpa picked up his plate, walked the full length of the table, and sat down beside me. He placed his hand gently over mine and nodded. "You remind me," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "that worth isn't measured by applause." No one dared speak. Even the clock on the wall sounded louder. Something broke inside me that night. Not my confidence, but the thin shell of fear I'd been living under. Because in that one quiet gesture, Grandpa reminded me I didn't need to prove myself to the people who already decided I was less. But I also knew one day I would. And when I did, they wouldn't laugh again. When I woke up the next morning, the house was as quiet as a stage after the curtain fell. You could still feel the echoes of last night, the silence after Grandpa's words, the way no one dared to look at me as I stood up from the table. I'd gone to bed without saying a word, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm outside, realizing that sometimes it isn't thunder that wakes you up, it's humiliation. I stuffed my sketchbook and a few clothes into an old duffel bag. My hands shook, but not from fear, from something that felt almost electric. Freedom, maybe. When I walked downstairs, Mom was in her silk robe, sipping her morning coffee at the kitchen island. The smell of expensive roast filled the air, masking the bitterness in her tone. "You're really leaving?" she asked, like she already knew the answer. I didn't look at her. "Yeah." She gave a small, dry laugh. "Riley, you can't just run away every time life gets uncomfortable." I zipped the bag and slung it over my shoulder. "I'm not running," I said quietly. "I'm finally walking away from people who don't see me." Dad appeared behind her, already dressed for work, his tie perfect, his face blank. "You're 26, he said sharply. "You have no savings, no career, no direction. You'll come crawling back. You always do." The words stung, but I didn't flinch. "Not this time," I said. "And when I don't, remember you said that." Mom sighed and shook her head, turning back to her coffee. "You always had a flair for drama." "Guess I learned from the best," I said and walked out. The screen door slammed behind me like punctuation, the sound of a chapter closing. For months, I barely scraped by. I rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat, the kind where the floor creaked every time you took a step. I worked part-time at a local design studio. Nothing glamorous, Just small ad campaigns for small-town businesses. But it was mine. My ideas, my sketches, my late nights. There were nights I cried. Nights I almost gave into the voice that sounded a lot like my mother's, saying I wasn't enough, that I'd never be more than a try. But every time that voice whispered, I remembered Grandpa's hand on mine. You remind me that worth isn't measured by applause. That sentence became my armor. I started freelancing. I built a portfolio. I stayed up until sunrise sketching branding ideas, digital mock-ups, reimagined designs for clients who didn't even know my name yet. I poured everything they laughed at into something real, something mine. One night, a client from California emailed me. He'd seen my work online, a simple redesign I'd posted on a local community page. "You've got talent," he wrote. "Ever considered starting your own agency?" My heart nearly stopped. I didn't have the money. I didn't have investors. But I had grit. So I said yes. I named it True North Designs. Because no matter how lost I felt, that name reminded me, there's always a direction, even when no one else believes you'll find it. 6 months later, things started changing. Clients turned into contracts. One project became 10. I hired 2 other young designers, both rejected by big firms for not having enough experience. I saw myself in them, and I promised I'd never treat them the way my parents treated me. Every late night, every call, every exhausted morning felt like a small victory. I wasn't rich yet. I wasn't famous. But for the first time, I wasn't invisible. Then one morning, while scrolling through my emails, I froze. It was from Henderson and Cole, a luxury real estate firm in the city, my dad's biggest corporate client. They wanted a rebrand. They'd stumbled across True North Designs through a LinkedIn recommendation. They didn't even know it was me. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. Then I smiled, slow, quiet, dangerous. "I'll take the meeting," I wrote back. The day of the pitch, I walked into their glass office tower with my hair tied back, wearing a navy suit that didn't scream for attention, but commanded it. My hands were steady, my steps calm. When the conference room door opened, Dad looked up from his chair. His face went pale. "Riley," he said, disbelief coating my name like frost. "Morning," I said, setting my laptop on the table. "Let's get started." He blinked. "You're presenting for True North?" "Yes. I'm the founder." Silence. I clicked the first slide, my designs lighting up the screen. Bold, clean, modern, nothing like the safe, stale branding his company had used for years. The executives nodded, impressed. Dad's assistant scribbled notes, glancing between us with wide eyes. When I finished, the room was quiet, not with dismissal this time, but with awe. "That," one of the executives said finally, "is exactly what we've been looking for." They approved the project on the spot. Dad didn't say a word. As I packed my things, I looked him in the eye and said softly, "Guess I found my direction after all." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. That night, I went home, sat on my balcony, and watched the city lights shimmer below me. My phone buzzed, a message from Grandpa. "Proud of you, kiddo. You didn't prove them wrong. You proved you right." For the first time in years, I let myself cry, not from pain but from release. Because the girl they mocked at that dinner table had finally learned the quietest truth. Sometimes the loudest revenge is peace. The invitation came wrapped in gold foil, with embossed letters that practically screamed money. My mother's handwriting still looked the same, elegant, distant, and cold. Family dinner. Friday. 7 p.m. Everyone will be there. For a second, I almost laughed. The last time we'd all sat at that table, I'd been humiliated into silence. Now I was being invited back. Not as a daughter they pitied, but as a woman they had underestimated. I took a long breath, looking out my office window at the city skyline. My company's name, True North Designs, was etched in silver on the glass. My team was growing, my reputation rising. We had just signed our 3rd high-profile client. I wasn't the same Riley who left that mansion with a duffel bag and shaking hands. This time, I would walk in calm, steady, and unshakable. When I arrived, every eye turned. Olivia was the first to speak. Wow, Riley, you look different. Her tone was soft but carried that familiar mix of surprise and discomfort. She wasn't used to looking up to me. Mom forced a smile that looked like it cost her effort. Riley, honey, so glad you made it. Dad stood, clearing his throat. You've been busy, I hear. Extremely, I said, setting my purse down. You'd be surprised how fast life changes when people stop laughing and start working. His jaw tightened. Olivia tried to shift the mood. So, tell us about your little design firm. What's it called again? True North Designs, I replied evenly. We just finished a major rebranding project for Henderson and Cole. Dad's fork froze midair. Mom blinked. That's your company's client? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I corrected gently. The deal's done. They loved the work. Olivia's eyes widened. Wait, that's Dad's. Olivia, Dad interrupted quickly, his tone sharp. That's enough. But it was too late. The realization hung in the air. The firm they used to brag about, Dad's crown jewel, had unknowingly hired me, and I had delivered better results than he ever expected. The room went still. You could hear the faint hum of the chandelier above. Grandpa's slow clap broke the silence. Everyone turned. He was smiling, calm, proud, eyes glimmering with that same fire from before. I told you, he said softly. The one who never asked for praise would earn it anyway. Mom tried to recover, her voice trembling between shock and pride. Riley, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We could have celebrated. I looked straight at her. You don't celebrate what you don't believe in. Dad exhaled, leaning back, his pride bleeding through his silence. You've done well, he said finally. No, I said gently. I became well. It wasn't said with anger. It was said with peace. The kind that came from finally standing on solid ground. Grandpa chuckled under his breath. Well, he said, rising slowly to his feet. Looks like I'm sitting with the right one again. That dinner didn't end with laughter or cruelty. It ended with silence, the heavy kind that comes when truth finally has the last word. As I walked out that night, the moonlight caught the edge of the glass door, and I caught my reflection, calm, confident, untouchable. The girl who once sat quietly, trying not to cry, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had turned every insult into momentum. And, for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I had my own. 2 weeks after that dinner, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it until the text came through. Riley, it's Dad. We need your help. Urgent. I stared at the message for a long time. The last time he'd said those words, I'd been 16 and naive enough to think help meant love. This time it was something else. I called back. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. Riley, Henderson and Cole just announced they're ending their partnership. We're losing clients. The investors are pulling out. I don't know what to do. It hit me like déjà vu. The proud man who once called me dead weight now sounded small. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because, he hesitated. Because your firm saved them. They mentioned you in a press release. They said you rebuilt their image. You did what my whole team couldn't. There was no arrogance in his voice now. Just something raw. Honest. I was wrong about you, he said. I need your help. For a moment I said nothing. Just silence. Then, I'll be there in an hour. When I walked into his office, it felt like stepping back into a version of myself I'd buried years ago. Same marble floors. Same cold air. But everything looked smaller now, like pride had shrunk the place from the inside out. He stood by the window, staring at the skyline that once made him feel powerful. They're leaving, Riley, he said quietly. All of them. I built this firm for your mother, for the family name. I thought power meant never asking for help. I was wrong. I took a slow breath. Then let's fix it. He turned, surprised. You'll do it? I nodded. Not for you. For the people who still work here. The ones who don't deserve to lose everything because of your ego.
He swallowed hard, then nodded.
Fair. For 3 weeks, I worked day and night. I called in my team from True North, trained his staff, rebuilt the firm's identity from the ground up. The same building that once laughed at my dreams now echoed with my voice leading meetings. Even Mom came by one day, standing quietly at the glass wall of the conference room. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed me everywhere. I could tell she didn't know how to process what she was seeing. Her daughter, the one who tries, commanding a room full of executives. When the last client deal was signed, applause broke out. People smiled again. And for once, Dad didn't stand in the center of the room. He stood beside me. "Riley," he said, extending his hand. "You didn't just save this company. You saved us." I looked at his hand for a long moment before shaking it. "No, Dad," I said softly. "You just finally saw me. That night, Grandpa called. I heard what you did," he said, voice trembling with quiet pride. "I knew that fire in you would find its way." "Thank you," I whispered. "You are the only one who ever believed I could." He chuckled.
"No, kiddo.
"You believed. You just needed someone to remind you." A month later, they invited me to another family dinner. Only this time, it wasn't in the mansion's grand dining hall. It was at Grandpa's house, the warm, creaky old place that always smelled like cinnamon and comfort. When I walked in, Mom was already there, setting plates. Dad was quiet, calmer somehow. Olivia smiled, genuine this time. Grandpa looked up from his seat and grinned. The real success of this family finally arrived. "Grandpa," I started, embarrassed, but he raised his cane slightly. "No, let me say it," he said. "They toasted the wrong daughter once. Tonight, I want to raise a glass to the one who taught us what success actually means." Mom's eyes glistened. Dad's hand tightened around his glass. For the first time in my life, their pride didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded real. I lifted my glass. "To the ones who fall behind, only to realize they were never behind at all," I said softly. Grandpa's grin widened. "Now that's my girl." Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I sat with Grandpa on the porch. The moonlight hit his silver hair, and for a moment, he looked younger, like time itself respected him. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't stand up for you that night to embarrass anyone.
I did it because I saw myself in you."
People once laughed at me, too. Said I'd never amount to much. But the ones who laugh are usually the ones who stop trying. I smiled. "You gave me strength that night."
He squeezed my hand.
"No, Riley. You took it. You just needed to see it was already yours." As I drove home later, city lights glittered like promises. My phone buzzed again, a message from Dad. "Thank you for everything. You made me proud to call you my daughter." And beneath it, "I'm sorry. I didn't cry this time." I just smiled because I finally understood something deep. Revenge doesn't always come as payback. Sometimes it comes as peace, power, and knowing they'll never look down on you again. The girl they once mocked at that dinner table had risen quietly, and now the world, their world, sat at her table instead. And this time, I was the one who didn't ask for praise. I'd already earned it.